Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Football Lockdown Extra. Today we are joined by the author of Wings of Change, Karan Tejwani. It's a book that comes out in November and details how Red Bull have got into football and how they're changing things up. But before we talk to Karan about that, make sure you're subscribed to Football Lockdown, as July is a very, very exciting month for us. Not only will you get our regular show every Tuesday, which reviews the games across Europe, looks at the latest transfer rumours, and of course includes a few fun games for listeners and our so-called expert panel to try. In addition, every Thursday during July, we'll have an exclusive interview, just like this one. So, make sure you're subscribed and don't forget to get in touch with us by finding us on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram, or by emailing us, footballlockdown@gmail.com. Now, on with the interview. Please enjoy. I'm delighted today to be joined by the author of the future book that's coming out, Wings of Change, How the World's Biggest Energy Drink Manufacturer Made a Mark in Football, Karan Tejwani. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be on. Thank you, Craig.
Excellent. I want to start really by asking why this subject for a book? What fascinates you about it?
I say this all the time. The group was very fascinating to write about because, personally, for me, I've been writing online for over 4 years. Well, at the time when I started writing, it was exactly 4 years, and now it's about 4.5 years. So I always wanted to write a book, and I felt that Red Bull and their football operations, because it's so young, they've been around for about 15 years. I felt that was the right thing for me to write about. Obviously, because I'm still only 20 and I can't be writing about a club that I've barely watched, say that have about 100, 200 years, about 150 years of history. That would be more difficult. And Red Bull have been around for all of my lifetime, and I've seen them more closely in recent years. And because their football is so good, their operation is so streamlined, they are one of the most sustainable clubs in the world. All four of them, all clubs they have, they're also sustainable, and they play a similar style of good, attractive football. That just made them all the more fascinating. So I would say it's that. And, I don't personally endorse what they do. I don't like the way they've gone about changing clubs, buying out their history and, almost denying their history. So, but if we put that to one side and we look at what they do on the pitch and in the boardroom where they're so modern, it's a very fascinating thing about them.
Do you want to just for our listeners, because most of our listeners are from the UK, and obviously they're aware of Arsenal, Man United, the traditions of English football per se. Could you just give, as I know it's difficult, a quick overview of this Red Bull structure and the clubs they own and kind of what they've done?
All right. So they have 4 primary clubs. That's RB Leipzig, which is the most popular, Red Bull Salzburg, which is the second most popular, then New York Red Bulls and MLS, and the 4th club is Red Bull Bragantino, which is in Brazil. And they have, you could say, 2 secondary clubs. One is FC Liefering in Austria, which is a feeder club to Red Bull Salzburg, and the other is Red Bull Brazil, which was the original Brazilian project, which failed, which didn't fail exactly, it just didn't become as big as the other 5 clubs. So that's the main structure. That's what they control. And obviously the youth, I'm going to exclude the youth teams from this. The original thing was in 2005, Dietrich Mateschitz bought Austria Salzburg. Dietrich Mateschitz is the founder of Red Bull, the co-founder of Red Bull. He started the company in 1987, and in 2005, after working with extreme sports, with Formula One and a lot of other sporting events, he took his operations to football, and he started off with his local club, which was Austria Salzburg. Now, Austria Salzburg at the time were a pretty historic Austrian club. They didn't have many trophies, but they had a bit of history. They won a few league titles a couple of decades before, and they played in the UEFA Cup final in 1994 against Inter, which they lost. So they had a bit of history about them. And then by the time Mateschitz said, "I'm interested in buying you all," Salzburg at the time was struggling. They were almost close to bankruptcy. They had no money and they needed a new sponsor. So the fans were pretty welcoming of that. They said that Mateschitz is investing in his local club and it's all jolly. Eventually they found out that Mateschitz didn't want to be just a sponsor. He wanted to make Austria Salzburg a Red Bull club, that he wanted to change the colors, he wanted to change the crest, the logo, everything, the stadium as well. And that's what people got really angry about. Now, Now, don't get this wrong. Sponsorship in Austria is pretty common. Clubs often change their names. They don't mind having a sponsor name as long as it brings them a bit of money. So that was no problem at all. The problem was that the colors became white and red rather than purple and white, which was the former colors. The stadium became the Red Bull Arena. The crest had those two bulls that's famous with Red Bull. So that's what people were really angry about. But moving on, in 2012, they got Ralf Rangnick, who is the main figure in this whole Red Bull structure. He changed all clubs from top to bottom. He said that he wants football played in a particular way. He wants transfers made in a particular way. If you notice, they don't sign players older than 24 years old. That is the primary thing for them. And they always play attacking football. They always press very aggressively. They always play very intensely, and it's always vertical. So I'm sure you have more questions about that later on, but that's the main basis of what Red Bull do.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I wanted to touch a little bit on the players. I know you briefly mentioned it just there, so I'm just going to read a list of player names of, Keita, Werner, Upamecano, Minamino, Haaland, just to name a few, and even coaches as well, like Julian Nagelsmann, Marco Rosa, and potentially Jesse Marsch. Like, there seems to be almost a constant conveyor belt of talent, not just of players on the field, but coaches as well. I think you've already kind of answered this a little bit. Like, is that in their philosophy? Is that a particular way they go about things, and they kind of don't change? How does that work there?
Yeah. So as I said before, Ralf Rangnick is the main man behind this. To understand what Red Bull do now, it's important to go back about 30 years and Ralf Rangnick's history. So back in 1990, when Germany won the World Cup, there was this common notion in Germany that what they were doing is bona fide and it's correct. It's going to last them forever, which was a sweeper system. And the sweeper system was, people felt at the time that because they won the World Cup in 1990, they had the invitation to go and live on with it and persist with it forever. But Ralf Rangnick was different from that. He felt that it wasn't going to last them for a very long time. And he was right, because as you saw with Germany, with Germany's results in the late 90s and the early 2000s, when they failed at 2004, they reached the World Cup final in 2002, but you could say that was a bit of a fluke. They had a bit of luck in the draw. They had a bit of luck from Oliver Kahn being probably the best goalkeeper in the world at the time. So they got a bit lucky, and people felt that the model wasn't going to last them forever. And Ralf Rangnick at the time was saying that we need to change our football, and he was actually doing it. He was second division manager at the time, and he was more intent on pressing. He was more aggressive he was more intent on zonal marking and all that sort of things. So he played football in a different way compared to the rest of Germany, and he got a fair bit of criticism for it, because they just felt that he's a second division manager. He won't, his ideas are just working for a short period of time. But he would prove he was eventually right. And from there on, Germany's football mindset changed. He is often considered the father of modern German football, even though he hasn't won that many trophies, or he hasn't managed a big club in Germany or anywhere in Europe. So that's the impact of his work. Because he hasn't really had a big move, he's still so impactful. And you could see it at clubs like Hoffenheim, where he took them from the third division to the top division by playing a certain way and following a certain method. And he did the same at Red Bull. So, he felt that was the right way to go. And he was given all the tools and the resources at Red Bull to do what he does. And he always employs managers who have a similar philosophy to him. Basically, you could say that they're his students, even though he didn't actually teach them. People like Roger Schmidt at Salzburg, people like Ralf Hasenhüttl, who's now at Southampton. He was at Leipzig before. You will notice that they all play in a similar way, and that in some way can be attributed to Ralf Rangnick.
Okay. So the Red Bull family, you've already touched on it. Obviously, we've got they've got teams in New York, Brazil, Leipzig, Salzburg.
Yep.
Can you foresee them expanding on that potentially into another big league, maybe even England at some point? Can you foresee that, or is their thirst kind of satisfied?
I don't think it's going to happen, because when Leipzig were bought, they bought the license to Leipzig, and Leipzig qualified for the Champions League in 2017 for the first time. There was a bit of a problem with UEFA regarding the ownership rules. They felt like two clubs who are owned by the same company, cannot play in the Champions League or play in any European competition. So Salzburg had to alter their ownership model, and now Red Bull said that they own Leipzig, but they're merely a sponsor of Salzburg. So there's a bit of complication with conflict of interest.
Mm.
So in European football, I don't think they're going to buy anyone else. In America, they already have one club. In Brazil, in South America, they have a club in Brazil, which is, Brazil's a talent mine, and I don't think that they're going to expand beyond Brazil. In Africa, they have a few operations going on with a few academies. They're linked with them, but they don't officially own anything. So I don't think that they're going to add another club to the portfolio. What they do is they try to find the best of what they try to find the best talent and where in places that they have clubs. For example, Tyler Adams, who plays Leipzig right now, played in New York previously. He is the perfect example of the Red Bull model. He grew up in the New York Academy. He was trained there, played for the academy teams, played for the first team, and then he moved to Leipzig. So that's what they're trying to do with regards to international players. They're trying to make them up within their own model, within their own philosophies, and bring them to Leipzig, which is the main club. So Leipzig and Salzburg aren't officially linked, but in a way, they kind of are.
Yeah. Does it frustrate you as well as me when people call Leipzig Red Bull Leipzig, even though that's not their actual name?
Yes, very much. They actually call Rasenballsport. It's not that difficult to understand.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm a Celtic fan, and when we drew both of them in the Europa League a couple of years ago, and it was just frustrating. It was the
Yeah.
everyone still called it the Red Bull Derby, but yeah, it was a bit strange playing both Salzburg and Leipzig.
Yeah, I mean they're technically Red Bull, but they're not actually Red Bull, are they? So it
Yeah,
is like confusing for some people.
yeah, it's the loophole to get around the
Yeah.
ownership rules that you just mentioned. I want to touch a little bit more on Salzburg because I mean I've actually seen Salzburg play. I've been to Austria and saw them play Austria Vienna, and they were very impressive. That was a good few years ago, actually. And I've seen them play my own club a few times, and some of the football they play is phenomenal. It's fast, it's quick, it's some of the best stuff I've seen in quite a while, especially a couple of years ago when they made the run to the Europa League. I think it was semi-finals.
Yep.
Their stuff was fascinating. Now, they're obviously in a smaller league in Europe, and I feel like we're at a time now in European football where there is a big discrepancy between the big teams in the smaller leagues and the kind of lesser teams in those leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yep.
Salzburg's dominance, and it's replicated elsewhere, is that an issue within that Austrian league? Like, is it morally right that they've got this backer, this Red Bull's kind of
Yeah.
organising all of this? Is that an issue?
You're right. The fans absolutely do not like it, apart from their own fans. The Austrian fans aren't particularly happy with what's happening. Salzburg have won 11 titles out of 15 since Red Bull took over. They've won 5 out of the last 6 cups. So it is, fans do feel it's a bit problematic that these guys have a much bigger advantage than the other clubs. And obviously, because of their links internationally, they can easily say we can loan in a player from Leipzig, we can loan in a younger player who doesn't play for them, and we can have him in our team. Or even, as I mentioned, they have a farm team called FC Liefering, where they buy in young players from abroad, for example, from Africa, from any country in Africa, or from Brazil, and they give them time in the farm team before promoting them to the first team. Not many clubs have those kind of resources, so they do feel it's a bit unfair that despite being in a much smaller league, they have such a massive advantage over the others. And that's been replicated by their dominance, as I mentioned. Even in the Champions League, no Austrian club has been able to reach that far or play that well as Salzburg in a very long time. So obviously, fans do feel that they are at a massive disadvantage.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, like, as a Celtic fan, I feel like European football it's at the point where it's you have the have-nots, and then in the big leagues, and then you have the same again in the little leagues. But we'll see how that goes moving forward. Looking at Leipzig now, in the Bundesliga, of course, Bayern have been very dominant. Dortmund are always the kind of nearly people, aren't they? Always finishing second. Then you've got Leverkusen, Gladbach, etc., etc. Can you foresee a situation where Leipzig, where they have risen up through the league so quickly, could ever get to a point where they are maybe as dominant as Bayern? And is it just a matter of time before they do end up winning that Bundesliga title?
I don't personally, I don't see them being as dominant as Bayern, but I do see them winning the Bundesliga at least within the next decade. The thing about Germany is that Bayern are so dominant. They have this mentality within them that they just have to keep winning, and that's impossible to stop. And that's an incredible thing for Bayern, especially when you see this season that Leipzig and Dortmund had a significant lead at Christmas, and people finally felt that this was the year Bayern were going to fall off, and yet here we are, Bayern champions again.
Yeah.
So fans do feel that football needs a change. German football needs a change, but they don't feel that. They feel that if it comes, Bayern won't be away for long. And I do feel that if anyone's going to stop Bayern's dominance, it's going to be RB Leipzig, because they have a good team. And if Nagelsmann stays, I think that he's going to be the one to stop Bayern's dominance. So, as I said, I don't feel that they're going to be as big or as dominant as Bayern, but I think winning even one title is a big enough achievement for them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe scaling it back a little bit. They've obviously just sold Timo Werner to Chelsea.
Yep.
Do you ever foresee a situation in the next few years where they get to the point where they feel like they don't have to sell those types of players until maybe later on in their career? I know they've got a structure that they follow where they almost kind of nurture and then sell on. Do you think that might happen?
I think it will happen when they finally win trophies. That's the complicated thing about German football, is that about Leipzig also, because I keep saying that they're going to be the ones to stop Bayern, as I said before, but I also feel that they keep selling their best players, so it's going to take even more time. So it's a bit of a conflict of how we see it, and it's difficult to explain, really. I feel that, as I said, once they win the big trophies, either even a cup, I feel that they're going to be at a point where they don't have to sell players, and I feel that players will want to stay because they're winning. Right now, Leipzig are in a bit of a transitionary phase, you could say, where they aren't as successful as they want to be. So players feel that they've done enough and they can move on. But once that success comes in, I feel that the management will be more strict on having players stay. One of the things about Leipzig is that they've always been profitable. They've never had a year where they've suffered a financial loss, and that's partly down to their player sales as well. So you could say that it comes down to balance in the books, but if it comes to success, they will probably feel that it's fine to make a loss as long as they're winning, and it boosts their brand as well. So it's a bit of a conflict, but yeah, I feel that if a trophy does come in, players will stay.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on a little bit was, maybe comparison isn't the right term here, but obviously with Manchester City, they're kind of under this, or I guess they're the head of the umbrella of this City Football Academy, where they've got clubs all over the world. So kind of similar to the Red Bull setup. Do you think this is going to be a more, what's the words I'm trying to look for? Is this going to be a staple moving forward with these big football clubs, these big organisations where they have an umbrella of clubs like Red Bull, like City? Is that the future?
I think it is, yes. I feel that more people see it as being a profitable thing, and especially if people have the money, football is always going to be the most popular game in the world. It's always going to attract interest wherever they go. So I feel that the people who have money, the rich ones, they're going to feel that football is a profitable thing, that they want to expand their operations as much as possible. And that's how it's happened with City, hasn't it? Because the initial few years saw them just having one club, and quickly they moved on. I think they have about 15 clubs now in 6 different continents or 5 different continents. So people do see it as something profitable and marketable. And for City itself, it's something that cleans up their image, the image of their government. So I do feel that you are right. It's going to be a more prevalent thing in the future, and more people will take part in it. Maybe even more states will take part in it. So you got to be prepared.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. Last question.
Yep.
Is it right?
It's difficult to say. The immediate answer is no. But if you look into the details, you could probably swing the other way. When it comes to Red Bull, especially, they're a special case, aren't they? Because everyone hates Red Bull. You go to Germany, you won't find a Leipzig fan in Dortmund. You won't find a Leipzig fan in Stuttgart. You won't find a Leipzig fan outside Leipzig, and the same goes for Salzburg. People hate both clubs. People hate their model, and despite that, they're so good, right? You feel like watching them every week. You feel like you almost admire their model and wish that your club plays that way. So from a moral view, no, it's probably not right because they're ruining the essence of the game. But from a sporting view, you can see why people do it.
Yeah, of course. It's almost like tradition versus a modern way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for your time. I think it's an absolutely fascinating subject. And as soon as I saw you on Twitter, I think it was a couple of months ago, and I saw that you were writing this book, I was like, wow, I absolutely need to learn more about that. Because like I said, from my first visit to Austria a few years ago where I watched Salzburg, I was just fascinated by the whole project, and then obviously the Leipzig thing. So no, thank you so much for your time. If people want to find out more about yourself and about the book, where can they go?
The book's on for pre-order on Amazon and Waterstones. If you pre-order right now, I'll reach you by November. Otherwise, I'm always available on Twitter if you want to have a chat with me. My DMs are open, and yeah, that's about it.
Brilliant. What's your Twitter handle?
Oh, it's at Karan_Tejwani 26. So.
Brilliant. I'll pop it in the podcast description as well. But Karan, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, pleased to be on. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to another episode of Football Lockdown. Please make sure that you subscribe to get more episodes of Football Lockdown with your podcast provider of choice, and also make sure that you give us a rating, preferably 5 stars, as that would really help us to boost the audience. And if we boost the audience, that means that we can do more stuff and get more shows out to you. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Search for us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, where we've got the pretty pictures on Instagram. Just search for Football Lockdown and you'll find us there. If you've got questions, then send them to our social media channels, or alternatively, if you're still using email, it's footballlockdown@gmail.com. I've been your host today, as always, Craig Shields, and it's goodbye from Scott, Mark, Stuart and myself, and we'll see you soon. Until then, we're out.